This is a true story of how British intelligence captured almost every German spy sent to Britain during World War II, and instead of executing them, turned them into double agents who fed carefully crafted lies back to Berlin. Between 1940 and 1945, MI5 ran 120 double agents through the double-cross system, controlling them so completely that by 1941, MI5 actively ran and controlled the German espionage system in the United Kingdom. The operation was overseen by the 20 Committee, named for the Roman numeral YST, a double cross, chaired by Oxford historian John Cecil Masterman, who coordinated a deception campaign so successful that German intelligence never realized their entire spy network in Britain had been compromised. When D-Day came on June 6, 1944, German commanders made fatal decisions about where to position their forces based on reports from agents they believed were loyal. Agents who were actually reading scripts written by British intelligence officers in London. What you're about to hear is not a story of James Bond-style heroics. It's a story of patient, meticulous, paperwork-driven espionage, of men and women living double lives under constant surveillance, knowing that one mistake could expose the entire system and get them killed. This is the double-cross system. Early failures, how easy it was to catch German spies. Let me take you back to 1940, when Nazi Germany began sending spies to Britain. After the fall of France, in June 1940, the German Military Intelligence Service, the Abwehr, launched an espionage campaign designed to gather intelligence in preparation for Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain. The Abwehr sent agents by parachute, submarine, and small boat. Their mission was to report on British military installations, troop movements, coastal defenses, and civilian morale. Berlin believed these agents would provide the intelligence needed to plan a successful invasion. There was just one problem: the spies were terrible. Many German agents were poorly trained, carrying outdated British currency, wearing clothes with German labels, and speaking English with heavy accents. Some landed with radio transmitters but no idea how to use them. Others made elementary mistakes, like asking for a train ticket at 10 p.m. when British trains stopped running at 9 p.m. due to wartime restrictions. MI5, Britain's domestic counterintelligence agency, had no trouble catching them. Some agents were arrested within hours of landing. Others turned themselves in voluntarily, realizing they had been sent on a suicide mission. A few were false agents who had tricked the Germans into helping them reach England with no intention of actually spying. And then there was Ultra, the British code-breaking operation that had cracked the German Enigma cipher. Through Ultra intercepts, MI5 received advance warning of when and where German agents would be arriving. British counterintelligence officers could be waiting at the landing site, ready to arrest the spy the moment they stepped ashore. By 1941, MI5 had captured virtually every German agent sent to Britain. Post-war records confirmed that bar one agent who committed suicide, none went unnoticed. The German spy network in Britain had been completely compromised. The question was what to do with them. The decision: execute or turn. Under British law, espionage was punishable by death. The obvious response was to execute captured spies, send a message to Berlin, and deter future attempts. Several German agents were indeed hanged at Pentonville prison during the war, but a few visionary officers in MI5 saw another possibility. What if, instead of killing the spies, Britain turned them into double agents? What if MI5 could control their radio transmissions back to Berlin, feeding the Germans a carefully scripted mixture of truth and lies? The idea wasn't entirely new. In the mid-1930s, MI5 had run a double agent codenamed Snow, a Welsh electrical engineer who had been caught spying for Germany. Snow became the first in what would eventually be 120 wartime double agents. In January 1941, MI5 formalized the program by establishing the 20 Committee, so named because the Roman numeral for 20 is a double cross. The committee was chaired by John Cecil Masterman, an Oxford historian, author, and international sportsman who had been recruited by MI5 at the start of the war. Masterman's role was to coordinate the disinformation fed to German intelligence through the double agents. Every message transmitted by a turned spy had to be approved by the 20 Committee. The messages had to be believable, accurate enough to maintain the agent's credibility with Berlin, but false enough to mislead German planners on critical strategic questions. This was a high-stakes gamble. If the Germans discovered the deception, they would stop trusting their agents, or worse, use the radio link to feed Britain false information in return. If a double agent made a mistake or became unreliable, the entire network could be compromised. But if it worked, MI5 would control the German intelligence picture of Britain. They could shape what Berlin believed, influence strategic decisions, and protect Allied operations from discovery. Think about the audacity of this plan. Instead of simply defending against espionage, MI5 decided to weaponize the enemy's own intelligence network, to turn Hitler's spies into British assets, feeding Berlin exactly the information Britain wanted them to believe. Life as a double agent, surveillance, scripts, and fear. Being a double agent in the double-cross system was not glamorous. It was tedious, terrifying, and required living a lie 24 hours a day. Double agents were kept under constant MI5 surveillance. They lived in safe houses or closely monitored apartments. They couldn't contact family or friends without permission. Every conversation, every movement, every radio transmission was watched and controlled. When it was time to send a message to Berlin, the agent didn't write it themselves. MI5 officers scripted the message, crafting each sentence to serve Britain's strategic goals. The agent would then transmit the message in Morse code using their German-issued radio, maintaining the illusion that they were operating independently. The messages had to sound authentic. They couldn't be too precise. That would make Berlin suspicious. They had to include mundane details, complaints about the difficulty of gathering intelligence, requests for money, and occasional minor mistakes that a real spy might make. MI5 even arranged for some double agents to receive payment from the Germans, usually through neutral countries like Portugal. The money was confiscated by British authorities, but the transactions helped maintain the agents' credibility. The psychological pressure was immense. Double agents knew that if the Germans suspected they had been turned, they would be marked for assassination. Or worse, their families in occupied Europe would be targeted. They lived with the knowledge that one slip, one inconsistency in their cover story could expose not just themselves but the entire double-cross system. And there was always the fear that MI5 would decide they were no longer useful. Several double agents were arrested and interned when MI5 lost confidence in their loyalty. Others were simply dropped from the program and left to wonder whether they would be prosecuted or allowed to disappear into civilian life. Imagine being a German spy who lands in Britain, gets captured within hours, and is given a choice: work for us or hang. You agree. For the next 4 years, you live in a safe house, surrounded by MI5 officers who don't trust you. Every day, you transmit messages you didn't write to handlers in Berlin who believe you're still loyal. You can't tell anyone the truth. You can't escape. And you know that if Berlin ever figures out what's happening, you're a dead man. The art of deception, mixing truth and lies. The genius of the double-cross system was in how MI5 crafted the messages sent by turned agents. The key was credibility. The information had to be accurate enough that Berlin would trust the source, but false or misleading on the questions that actually mattered. MI5 used a technique called chicken feed, feeding the Germans true but harmless information mixed with strategic lies. For example, a double agent might accurately report the location of a military base that Berlin already knew about, then falsely claim that the base was being expanded in preparation for an operation in Norway when the real target was France. The 20 Committee coordinated this carefully across all double agents to ensure consistency. If one agent reported that a fictional division was stationed in Kent, another agent might confirm the report by mentioning seeing vehicles with that division's markings. The cross-confirmation made the lie more believable. MI5 also used double agents to test whether the Germans were reading other intelligence sources. If a double agent reported false information and it showed up in German planning documents, intercepted via Ultra, that proved Berlin was relying on the double-cross network. One of the most effective tactics was using double agents to misdirect German bombing raids. When the Germans began using V-1 flying bombs and V-2 rockets against London in 1944, MI5 controlled agents sent false reports claiming the missiles were overshooting their targets and landing north of London. In reality, many were falling short and hitting southern suburbs. Based on the false reports, German engineers adjusted their aim, causing subsequent missiles to fall even shorter, into less populated areas. This deception likely saved thousands of lives, but it also meant that some civilians died in the southern suburbs because MI5 deliberately ensured the Germans kept targeting that area rather than correcting their aim towards the city center. Many of you have asked in comments, was that ethical? Is it acceptable to sacrifice some civilians to save more? Who gets to make that decision? The key players, GARBO, TRICYCLE, and ZIGZAG. Several double agents became legendary for their contributions to the double-cross system. Let me introduce you to three of the most important. Juan Pujol Garcia, code-named GARBO, was a Spaniard who hated fascism and wanted to help the Allies. He initially approached British intelligence offering to spy for them, but was rejected. Undeterred, he approached German intelligence, convinced them he was a Nazi sympathizer, and got himself hired as a spy in Britain, despite never actually going there. From Lisbon, Pujol fabricated intelligence reports about Britain using guidebooks, maps, and his imagination. He invented an entire network of fictitious subagents and sent detailed reports to Berlin that were pure fantasy. The Germans believed him completely. Eventually, MI5 discovered Pujol's one-man deception operation and recruited him as a legitimate double agent. His extensive network of imaginary subagents and his meticulous, convincing reports made him one of the most successful double agents in history. His disinformation efforts were instrumental in convincing the Germans that the D-Day invasion would occur at Pas de Calais rather than Normandy. Eddie Chapman, codenamed ZIGZAG, was a British criminal and safecracker who had been imprisoned in Jersey when the Germans occupied the Channel Islands. Chapman offered to spy for Germany in exchange for his freedom. The Germans trained him in sabotage and espionage, then sent him to England by parachute. Chapman immediately approached MI5 and offered to become a double agent. His colorful personality, daring exploits, and convincing reports made him an invaluable asset. Chapman played a crucial role in feeding false information to the Germans, including misleading them about the success of their bombing raids on Britain. Dusan Popov, codenamed Tricycle, was a Yugoslav lawyer and playboy who worked as a double agent for both the British and the Germans. Popov is believed to have been one of the inspirations for Ian Fleming's James Bond character. He played a key role in Operation Fortitude, the massive deception operation that convinced the Germans the D-Day invasion would target Calais instead of Normandy. These agents didn't work in isolation. The 20 Committee coordinated their reports to create a coherent, believable intelligence picture for Berlin. Each agent's messages supported and reinforced the others, building a narrative that shaped German strategic decisions. Operation Fortitude, the double-cross system's greatest success. The double-cross system's most important contribution was to Operation Fortitude, the deception operation designed to mislead the Germans about the location of the D-Day invasion. In the months before June 6, 1944, double agents like GARBO, Tricycle, and others sent a steady stream of reports to Berlin describing a massive Allied army, the fictional 1st United States Army Group, FUSAG, assembling in southeast England under the command of General Patton. The agents reported incredibly specific details. They described unit insignia, vehicle types, the locations of fake camps and airfields, and overheard conversations about invasion plans targeting Pas de Calais. These reports accurately reflected the fake intelligence the Germans were gathering through misdirected reconnaissance and intercepted also fake radio transmissions. The deception worked. German high command believed the reports from their agents in Britain. When the Normandy landings began on June 6th, Hitler and his generals were convinced it was a diversion, that the real invasion was still coming at Calais. For weeks after D-Day, German forces remained positioned near Calais, waiting for Patton's Phantom Army. By the time they realized the truth, the Allies had secured the beachhead and begun the liberation of France. Masterman's role was critical. He coordinated the double agents' reports to ensure they told a consistent, believable story. He worked with military planners to decide what information could be revealed and what had to remain secret. And he managed the egos, fears, and demands of over 100 double agents, each of whom believed their contribution was the most important. Post-war records confirmed that the double-cross system had been devastatingly effective. Almost all German agents sent to Britain had been captured or turned. The few who weren't caught either committed suicide or were so ineffective that they provided no useful intelligence. The Germans never realized their entire spy network in Britain had been compromised. They kept sending agents, they kept trusting the reports, and they kept making strategic decisions based on information controlled by MI5. Post-war revelations, the secret becomes history. The double-cross system remained classified for decades after the war. The British government didn't want potential enemies to know how thoroughly it had penetrated German intelligence, or how effective double-agent operations could be. In 1972, John Cecil Masterman published his wartime report on the double-cross system, revealing the operation's existence and scope. The book, titled The Double-Cross System, 1939 to 1945, caused a sensation. For the first time, the public learned that MI5 had controlled virtually every German spy in Britain and used them to deceive Hitler himself. The revelations were met with astonishment and pride. The British press celebrated the ingenuity and dedication of MI5's officers and agents. Historians hailed the double-cross system as one of the greatest intelligence operations in history. But there was also controversy. Some former intelligence officers were angry that Masterman had revealed classified methods. Others questioned the ethics of using captured agents as pawns in a deception game where mistakes could cost lives. And some families were hurt. They learned that loved ones who had died in bombing raids might have survived if MI5 had provided accurate intelligence to German forces instead of deliberately misdirecting them. The decision to use double agents to manipulate V-weapon targeting meant accepting that some civilians would die in areas MI5 chose not to protect. Several double agents came forward after Masterman's book was published. Eddie Chapman wrote his memoirs. Juan Pujol Garcia gave interviews. The stories of these men, who had lived double lives under constant threat, became part of the public record. But many agents never spoke publicly. Some died without revealing their wartime roles. Others chose silence, believing that even decades later, discussing intelligence work was a betrayal of the trust placed in them. The ethical questions. Using people as tools. Here's what we know. Between 1940 and 1945, MI5 captured almost every German spy sent to Britain and turned 120 of them into double agents. These agents transmitted thousands of messages to Berlin, carefully scripted by the 20 Committee to feed German intelligence a mixture of truth and lies. The deception was extraordinarily successful. By 1941, MI5 actively ran and controlled the German espionage system in Britain. German commanders made strategic decisions, including where to position forces during D-Day, based on reports from agents they believed were loyal but who were actually reading British scripts. But the double-cross system raised profound ethical questions that remain unresolved. Question 1. Were the double agents victims or collaborators? Most had been coerced, captured, and given the choice between working for MI5 or being executed. They didn't volunteer, they didn't want to betray their country, they simply wanted to live. But once they agreed, they spent years actively deceiving their former handlers, contributing to Germany's defeat. Were they traitors, or were they prisoners forced to play a role? Question 2. Was it ethical to manipulate V-weapon targeting? MI5 used double agents to send false reports claiming German rockets were overshooting London, causing the Germans to adjust their aim and hit southern suburbs instead of the city center. This likely saved thousands of lives overall, but it also meant MI5 deliberately chose which neighborhoods would be targeted. Who gave them the right to make that decision? Should the families in the southern suburbs have been told their homes were sacrificed to protect others? Question 3. What about the double agents who were abandoned? Not all double agents were successful. Some were deemed unreliable and dropped from the program. Others were interned when MI5 lost confidence in them. These men had risked their lives, or at least agreed to cooperate under threat of death, and were then discarded when they were no longer useful. Did Britain owe them anything? Protection? Compensation? Gratitude? Question 4. Should the operation have remained secret? For decades after the war, families didn't know that intelligence failures and strategic deceptions, not enemy superiority, had contributed to deaths. They were told that German spies were operating in Britain, that security was paramount, that everyone had to be vigilant. They didn't know MI5 had controlled those spies and used them for deception. Did they deserve the truth, or was national security more important than transparency? Many of you will say the double-cross system was a brilliant, necessary operation that saved lives and shortened the war. You're right, it did. Others will say it was morally questionable, that using human beings as tools, manipulating where bombs fell, and keeping the truth hidden for decades was wrong, regardless of the strategic benefits. You're also right. Both of those things can be true at the same time. The uncomfortable truth. Here's what we know. MI5 captured almost every German spy sent to Britain during World War II and turned them into double agents who fed disinformation to Berlin. The operation was coordinated by the 20 Committee under John Cecil Masterman and was so successful that by 1941, MI5 controlled the entire German espionage system in Britain. The double-cross system contributed to the success of D-Day by convincing German commanders that the invasion would target Calais instead of Normandy. It saved lives by misdirecting German V-weapon targeting. It gave Britain and the Allies a decisive intelligence advantage, but it also used captured agents as pawns in a high-stakes deception game where mistakes could be fatal. It deliberately manipulated where German bombs and rockets fell, accepting that some civilians would die to save others. And it remained classified for decades, denying families the truth about how and why their loved ones died. I want you to imagine something. You are a German spy, captured hours after landing in Britain in 1940. MI5 offers you a choice: work for us or hang. You agree. For 5 years, you live under surveillance, transmitting messages written by British intelligence officers. You help deceive your former country, contributing to its defeat. When the war ends, you're released, but told never to speak about what you did. You spend the rest of your life wondering, were you a traitor, a survivor, a victim, or just a tool used and discarded by people who never cared about you at all? The double agents didn't choose to be spies. Most didn't choose to become double agents. They were coerced. They lived in fear, under constant surveillance, knowing that one mistake could expose the system and get them killed. And when it was over, many were forgotten. No medals, no public recognition, just silence. The double-cross system was one of the greatest intelligence operations in history. It deceived Hitler, shaped the outcome of the war, and saved thousands of lives. But it was also a system that treated human beings, even enemy agents, as expendable assets, to be used, manipulated, and discarded when no longer useful. Should we celebrate that? Condemn it? Or simply acknowledge the uncomfortable reality that winning a total war required both brilliance and moral compromise? If stories like this matter to you, share this video and subscribe so more people hear them. The spies were captured, the agents were turned, the system worked, but the questions about what it cost and whether it